Right. We are getting into the COVID drug wars that pitted doctor versus doctor. It's a spicy title. Uh, it was published last year in the New York Times Magazine, written by Susan Dominus, who I think is not primarily a science writer. I think she's a staff writer in I think Susan Dominus is a staff writer in the New York Times. For me, I'm just trying to get a diversity of types of readings for all types of students. My personal background is I'm teaching high schoolers and middle schoolers who will eventually take things like the SAT or the ACT test, so that they should be prepared to read difficult things that cover not just fiction, not just, for example, poetry for some of the weirder ones of them who want to take like AP Lit for their classes later on, but also like science writing and social sort of critical writing. So I'm trying to get a variety of those types of readings in for my students. And today will be the first time I'm streaming from this Best American Science and Nature Writing book. The Best American series is such a major force now in publication for anybody who wants to have up-to-date current readings. And so it's my first time buying the Science and Nature Writing edition of it. But I read the introduction by Ed Yong, and honestly, it was such a smart, well-written introduction for why Ed Yong, the editor, like put these pieces together. I just really want to read this whole book. So I think, my expectations are pretty high, and I chose this particular one because I remember seeing on a brief like kind of skim through of like various Twitter reactions that the response to this particular essay was pretty good. So let me just show you how I would go about with the pre-reading, just increasing my personal level of interest before I even do a reading. Like I say to all of my students, the first step of reading something is to choose to read it. And you don't choose to read every book that comes your way, or every story or every essay that comes your way. You only choose to read the ones that you actually want to read. So wanting to read something, the whole process of getting to wanting to read something and then reading it, before reading it, that is the pre-reading. That's what pre-reading is about. It's not about memorizing themes or chapter names or character names or anything like that. It's about wanting to read it. And so I'm just going to do that right now, kind of simulating what it's like for me to want to read this. I already did a little bit of pre-reading before today, so because I had to select this thing, but I did it as roughly as possible, as hurriedly as possible, so that I didn't have too much of a bias coming in. So this is going to be me still making some discoveries along the way. So how do I show you how I would go about learning about this reading, this text? Let me make sure I can show you my screen. There we go. Let me make the dimensions correct so it's not all weird. Right now it's all cut off on the sides, and that should be more or less doable. I'm just gonna squeeze that in real quick. Okay, and now we're ready to go. All right. So what am I looking for right now? The COVID drug. So this is literally published in the New York Times last year. Was it published 2020? It must have been published 2020, now that I think about it, because it was included in the 2021 edition of the series. So I'm going to go edit that right now in my sidebar down here. Okay, so now it says 2020 instead of 2021. Okay, anyway, so normally, the thing about this is because it's not like a classic of world literature or anything, you're not going to get a bunch of, like if I do Goodreads at the end of this, I'm not going to get anything. Yeah, I would have been shocked if I did. So hang on, what? I saw something really shockingly similar. That is probably not it because NHS I think is the UK thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So so I'm not gonna get anything from Goodreads by doing this, right? Because it's not like a book. What it is an essay that was included in selection. It was selected by the Best American series. It's an essay that was published in the New York Times. There's actually a minor chance that the New York Times is gonna come to find this essay and be like, take it down. So we'll see if that actually happens. But to the editors of the New York Times, I'm just an educator. I'm just trying to help kids come and read good things and learn to enjoy it. Hey Matthew, good to see you. So I'm just trying to. So how would I learn like people's intellectual and emotional reactions to this kind of thing? Honestly, at this point, it would be Twitter. It would have to be Twitter. Now, so there are two things I could do. I can look up Susan Dominus, right? So I think that's the first thing. And she is a columnist for the New York Times. Oh, and she has a Twitter account, and she has a Yale account, not account, but like a CV. Oh, longform.org. I haven't seen that website in forever, but that's a thing. So I could learn a little more about her. But she's not going to be like William Faulkner will have his own Wikipedia page with a lot of information, biographical details. But this is a real person who's alive right now and may have a Wikipedia page, but it's not going to be a page full of like archival materials. You know what I mean? So this is a real person, right? So that changes the pre-reading for our purposes. It's different from the previous books the books and stories that I've streamed here. And yeah, one of the things I'm noticing right now, just skimming through this, is that she's definitely not just a science writer. She's a general socially aware staff writer at the New York Times Magazine, talking about a lot of different things. Maybe if we come here, we can learn a little bit more about the kinds of things she's writing. Right, just okay. Politics, maybe student depression, pandemic, Tammy Duckworth. So lots of different things. Okay, so that's that. A lecturer at Yale. Team that won the Pulitzer Prize for breaking news of the coverage of the scandal. Okay, Elliot Spitzer. Okay, so that was 12 years ago. And here we go. Right. So there's not a lot else I could say other than she's a real person. Shout out to Susan Dominus. Thank you for writing this in-depth look into the COVID situation, the real look on the ground. The other main thing I could do again is Twitter. So here's what I'm going to do right now. I'm searching for COVID drug war that pitted doctor in Twitter. Okay. Versus doctor. That shouldn't normally. The wars. The COVID drug wars. Okay, here we go. Now we get the wars. That was a little awkward. I'm actually a little surprised that Twitter doesn't just automatically account for that missing S, but whatever. Search engines hard to develop, I guess. The S is a little surprising though, honestly. But I'm looking at this, and if I do this, one of the things I might do is I just might go into advanced search and look for. Hang on, do I have the title yet? Let me get this copy pasted so I don't have to keep rewriting. Okay, and I'm just gonna look for filters. Minimum likes, I don't know, 10. So let's just work with that. Okay, so we have a doctor. the anchor of wikidoc.org, who is saying, in the absence of conclusive research for COVID-19 treatments, this is back in August 2020, many doctors are having to rely on their experience to make judgment calls about medications. I wonder if he goes on. Correction. So we have a little bit of a fight here. Prefer relying on their judgment instead of... Funny. I bet this gets right at the heart of the actual issue, right? The issue is... Are they forced to by their circumstance, or are they doing something bad by relying on their own judgments? So do we trust the system more or the individuals on the ground? I think that gets at the heart of the probable theme of this essay, which I can kind of know because I've already read the introduction essay by Ed Yong in this book. See, okay, here we go. Perhaps the best article I've ever read on the conflict between the demands of medicine and the limits of science. Particularly so I'm assuming the demands of medicine in crisis mode means like of medical practitioners on the ground. And the limits of science is like, are we allowed? How much freedom should frontline clinicians have? Treating people with unproven drugs, this question has opened up a civil war. Wow, doctors were called witches for making decisions. And that's crazy, right? That's like the thing. That's if I were to I mean, maybe even my high school students have experienced this, or some of the high school students out there have experienced this. But when you make a customer service call, you make a call to like a customer service department or customer support department for, I don't know, Amazon, wherever. I don't know if this is still the kind of thing high schoolers do. At least I used to do it when I was a kid. You could sometimes tell that they were just reading from a script and they had no freedom to do anything on their own. Alternatively, there are other times, depending on what company that you're calling, where you could definitely tell that the customer support agents were able to choose what to do, kind of respond to you as the circumstances warranted it. And that's the thing that I think these doctors were going through. Do they have the freedom to make a call and go with it to help with the response to a crisis, or do they not? Must they obey the system? And I think that's going to be an ongoing theme. If you're being called a witch just for making decisions, maybe maybe those people are horrible, right? But it's not like the people who are setting up the systems are also like demons. They're not trying to create a system that's bad. They're just trying to create a system that's reliable, where people, where maybe, they're scared more of the rogue doctor prescribing things that's actually harming people, even though the doctor may or may not, may be extremely educated and maybe well-intentioned. There may be a lot of data that you can see, and you can only see the patterns in the data in the aggregate and not at the individual level. So should the system have more control over what happens on the ground, or should the people on the ground be able to call their shots? I'm interested in this just because, I've never thought about how the doctors would have to do it, but like the COVID situation is such an extreme and dramatic situation. I bet that it probably it might open up a lot of thoughts or ideas about how medicine should be. Is modern medicine too slow? For example, is one of the thoughts that comes to mind. Let me see what happens if I get rid of this. See, I just want to see some other tweets. I wonder if there's a way to backlink just this link and get a list of the blogs that sort of like the blogs that sort of mentioned this link, this particular link. I wish there was some way of doing that. That's interesting. That's an interesting thing to say. Disease consultant. Okay, there's not a lot to learn just from that one comment, that one stray comment. Oh, here. Epistemology, not epidemiology. Not sure. I'm kind of confused right now. I'm just going to skip. Okay. Okay, it's a lot of shares, but not a lot of information, huh? Look at this, though. Whew. That's a intense sentence. That's an intense sentence. With their literal and intellectual distance from the ICU, we're pressing them to think about the thousands of patients who are sure to follow, to slow down long enough to build a body of evidence that they knew with more certainty could help. Wow. That actually encapsulates a lot of the issue itself, right? What might be interesting is to see what Dominus actually... Here, maybe I could just do something by Susan Dominus, right? So maybe see her thoughts on COVID doctors. Okay, let me just go into that from Susan Dominus and see what happens here. There we go. This is Susan Dominus. This is the writer actually directly sharing. So it might be good to see the kinds of questions or the kinds of comments she makes in a more lightweight form than the actual essay itself. Would you want your doctors to try something that they thought might help, but for all they knew could make you worse? Where did that tension leave us? Let's see how people responded if they did. See, go for best practice every time, not opinion. See, this is such an easy thing to say. Go for best practice every time. But the problem is that the idea of a best practice is evolving in real time, right? So that's the problem that this essay is trying to delve into. We don't know what the best practice is. People are dying in front of us. Should we just treat them right now, or should we slow down, gather data? It's such a crazy dilemma to be in. Yeah. And Hillary Ashton is basically saying some similar. Exactly. The best practices aren't clear because they don't exist. We'll see what this debate was about. Oh, that's interesting. That someone makes an admission that they wish they'd been more committed to trials. Man, that's a painful admission to make, right? Later on. So presumably Mangala Narasimhan presumably was somebody who was more like, F it, I'm gonna treat these people, right? That was probably more what his or her position was. Olivia, what's up? I don't know if you're still there, but hey, welcome to the stream. And I'm just looking at this. This is I'm looking forward to hearing this story being fleshed out, just seeing what happens there. Don't allow physicians to experiment on you. I've closely worked with them, and I trust maybe 10% of them. I wonder where this skepticism comes from. Joey Vasquez. I wonder where that comes from. I wish we had a little bit more, detail why, but it's hard to know. We have an ER doctor who says that Dominus has captured the internal culture very well. So good to have that. It's just a lot of people responding. It's good to have a lot of people responding. I'm glad I found this particular thread, but I'm going to move on because it's a lot of people just saying cool. So I want to move on to something that's not just people saying cool. I think I saw all the controversial tweets already. The untested drugs. That was reckless. Witchcraft. Killing. Civil War level medicine. Fighting for lives while fighting amongst themselves. No miracle drug has emerged. This is before. Man. This must have been before. Yeah, this 2020. Hang on. August 2020. When did the vaccines first come out? Was it Moderna first came out? Moderna vaccine first came out. Oh, well, still, when was this? That was December. So, yeah, this was a couple months before the vaccines. Okay, I'm just looking at some of these. One doctor told me her team remained close in spite of COVID, not because of it. Stress was so high, but differences about whether to treat in absence of clear evidence benefits in particular kicked up heated emotions. Okay, so apparently, yeah, COVID didn't make people closer. That's a whole separate thing. Anyway, that's a lot of. I mean, that's already honestly. I think I've probably pre-read more than I normally would have because this is just a New York Times essay, so I don't think I would have done a lot more than that. But I definitely think the thing that's most interesting to me personally about this is just just seeing the struggle, man. It's not an easy question to be dealing with in real time. So I wanna work with that real quick. Like even this one quotation. My take home is that I wish we had done more randomized controlled trials so we could have had some real answers so that we could tell Florida and Texas this works and this doesn't work. That the New York people could tell the other people. Tough, man, tough. So I'm gonna get into this right now. And by the way, the most obvious pre-reading too for something like this, since I found this particular essay through this particular book, and this book has an introduction, and it tells me, right, why these essays were included in this book, and I'm just looking for Susan Dominus real quick. Here we go. We have Susan Dominus coming out right here. Susan Dominus reports on the civil wars that arose between frontline clinicians who were torn between the need to try anything right now and the need to accumulate evidence about what treatments actually worked. I think this is such a relatable problem. I mean, not relatable, but it's a problem you can imagine, like we can really imagine, and I can imagine it really tearing the walls of politeness down. I can imagine it being a heated debate. Here we go. Let's get into the story now. Long Island, as in back close to Manhattan, so in New York. The surge was May. Okay, right. Oh no, the surge was ending by May. Long Island Jewish Medical Center is the name. Okay, here we go. Nordwell. Do we know what that is? No, we don't. It might be tense. It's a guy. a researcher, a research arm at Northwell, who's running a clinical trial. So that's where the tension is. Spiropoulos. I see. They're not supposed to know. But Han believed that they needed the higher dose, which would require the patient to be removed from the trial, which would damage the data, reduce the amount of data that was going back. How could researchers dictate care to a doctor right there at the bedside, especially when a patient's condition was so dire? That is intense. They're tight-knit. Excuse me. Relying on gut instinct was essentially witchcraft. For Tagaya, the word landed like a blow. There was a chill in the air. The headline says it all. Endotracheal tube, somewhere in the mouth, in the throat, I mean. Okay, well, I'm just gonna move on. Oh, yeah. Wow. Making those kinds of decisions all day long. That's painful, man. That is so painful. Just because that's tiring to make those decisions. That is not easy to make those decisions. No value to the sacrifice you made. Remdesivir. Wasn't this very controversial? It's not something I was paying attention to, but everything is conjecture. And then the volume, the newness and the volume, the lives. With no federal guidance, no case studies, no precedent. They would take into consideration any information that was available, observations, conversations in WhatsApp or Facebook groups, No peer-reviewed stuff, just hearsay. The doctors who are more heavily researched in research were frustrated that they were not focusing on research, empirical research. You need emotions cannot carry the day. So this is what's his name? Kevin Tracy is saying, is saying something true but painful and maybe a little robotic to some, but raw emotion trying to help survive is not good enough. You need evidence. It's such a this could be like a Hollywood drama. It really could. Ethan Weiss was distressed by how many doctors were quickly trying untested therapies. It's like civil war, he said. This seems like a good idea. Yo, this that's kind of scary too. With their literal and intellectual distance, we're pressing them to think about the thousands of patients who are sure to follow. Slow down. It became like Republicans and Democrats. The two sides can't talk to each other. Hang on. Oh, equipoise. I was actually literally just thinking, what's the word for this? And there it is. Clinical equipoise. The word for this, what's equipoise? Equipoise is when you're trying to have some sort of neutrality. Anyway, it'll be defined right here. A neutral mindset. That's what researchers are supposed to do. They're supposed to have a neutrality. It's a point at which a doctor's curiosity is greater than a conviction that any one result is the most likely one. Basically, equipoise means, maybe I kind of. Equipoise is something I don't have when I decide that A is better than B. I have to go into some research assuming A may not be better than B, and that's equipoise. Anaphylactic. An allergic reaction that is rapid in onset and may cause death. So kind of could choke you. Anaphylactic. Cytokine storms. Cytokine. Is cytokine the right pronunciation? I'll move on from the technical words. I understand it has never been trialed, but there is clearly enough data to support its use. Oh, sorry, my shoulder is just hurting. So I think one of the I'm going to bring my own opinion to this for a second, even though I don't know anything about what's going on. But I think one of the problems may be statistical thinking is not something that's very intuitive to apply in everyday life. So people might have very strong opinions about something, but be informed very differently about the way they think about these kinds of trials. Just moving on then. Just a random thought that occurred to me. Moving on. Right, enrolling a patient and giving them and basically if you enroll one of your patients into a trial, the problem is they might just get a placebo, which is ethically a little tough. Tosi. Huh. I would be upset putting somebody into that trial if it was my loved one. Give the damn drug to everybody, is what this doctor was saying. Bugvar. Wow. Huh. And they are requesting the drug, but they cannot get the drug, and Northwell is trying to conserve the drug. Whew, man, that is. There's no proof that anything works. Everything is experimental. As for enrolling patients in a trial, as overwhelmed as she was, she hardly felt she was in position to take that on. Hmm. And that was gone. Narasimhan. Narasimhan. I'm going to say Narasimhan. Narasimhan says, and that sucks as a doctor to not be able to choose what to do. There were infectious disease doctors who actually thought, oh, wow, you're killing these patients, said one person. That's okay. Tosi. She was fighting off a bunch of hematologists. Aberg was the one saying no, I think. Yeah, Aberg was the one saying no. And patients started demanding it. That makes it even crazier. Even when their inflammatory markers are normal. just to give it because there were no other therapies. That's stressful, man. The doctors are fighting, and then now the patients are demanding. By May, they stopped pressing for Tosi. They were starting to shift over to convalescent plasma. We're grasping for anything. That sounds so stressful to work in that environment. Oh my god. Thank you to all the doctors who who dealt with that, who responded. And the irony for me from reading from Korea is just how not uh, how much the ICUs in Korea were not that overwhelmed compared to America. Ugh. And then apparently Toasty was actually not so great. That's painful. That Toasty could be dangerous. Okay, this was the admission that Susan Dominus had mentioned in that tweet. We had done more randomized controlled trials so we could have some real answers so that we could tell Florida and Texas what works and what doesn't. We had this fixation. Ooh, yeah. Hydroxychloroquine. That was a big deal. Because the physicians wanted it so badly, we couldn't really study it in a more neutral way. And then when we finally did study it, turned out it wasn't that useful. He was hoping to get 150. By then, had already claimed this is April 1st. Trump had claimed that the drug was a game changer. Some doctors were taking it prophylactically, which means what does that mean? Right, as a defense. I had no idea prophylactic meant a condom in America. That's so random. All right. And a so prophylaxine for defending. Even though the evidence was slim. And reports were imagining it was causing heart problems. The Buddha waited for weeks. Only a handful were enrolled in his trial each day. That sucks. That sucks so hard from a researcher's perspective. And I see how okay, now we're seeing the researcher's perspective, right? By the time a nurse could even begin a conversation, they had already been given hydroxychloroquine. They were disqualified one by one. Incredibly well-read, knowledgeable physicians were just panic prescribing hydroxychloroquine. I've never seen anything like it. People were just lost in the storm. Kaplan at NYU. The panicked rhetoric about the right to try must be aggressively discouraged in order for scientists to learn what regimens and vaccines actually work. You know, that's yeah. Oh man, that's crazy because the medical research pipeline requires the trust of, well, so there's two ways about this, right? You can just kind of say nothing to the public, like whatever the doctors are talking about, they will hide it. The problem is though that that doesn't actually engender a lot of trust. People don't trust people. People don't trust other people who have secrets. So the other way of dealing with, but maybe if you are really good at keeping those secrets, then maybe you can just do your studies in quiet and finally ship the thing that actually works as fast as possible, rather than what you're getting here, which is people clamoring for a drug that may or may not work, and as a result, not being able to actually study it because everyone's getting it before you can even like cohort them. You can group them into different groups for the control and the experiment treatments. So. If you are not going to make it a secret, then the other thing you could do is speak directly to the public and let them know, hey, we need to study what's going on. We don't know if it's going to work. There could be side effects. The problem, though, is that that's really bad politics, and it's there's some way of surmounting this obstacle, but from what I understand of public speaking and public policy, is that kind of thing is really hard to persuade the public of. Huh. We can always do more harm. It came out of Britain. Was not effective. Right, in Britain, they urged doctor not to prescribe. So they were more scientific in this. They were doing the science. They were able to do the science more. So they were looking at hydroxychloroquine, toci, convalescent plasma, all these other things. As many as 60% were able to go in. Northwell, which is committed to research, was only able to get around 20% in trials. I see. I didn't know this about hospitals, but apparently in America, the hospitals are connected to systems, and the systems are kind of are leading the research. The commitment to long shot efforts to rescue patients was stronger than the commitment to give to science. We did a lot, but we could have gone faster and resolved questions sooner. The meeting among Cornea's colleagues took an adversarial turn. There is no evidence, her voice raised. He fired back with equal intensity. People don't yell in Wisconsin. Oof. Okay, so lots of fighting. Wow, that's a strongly worded email, man. They make it sound like we're experimenting, but they're getting it wrong. It's not like a hypothesis, but more like a problem, and I have to figure out how to fix it with a couple of decades of experience to back me up. It's a stretch to call it a hypothesis, it's just me doctoring. He resigned. If doctors could only apply supportive care and couldn't actually, make decisions. Also resigned. I wonder if this is a cultural difference between American doctors and UK doctors. Maybe other doctors in other systems kind of just follow the system. So this could make this more of a uniquely American problem. Or maybe not uniquely, but like a more common issue in America. Um, I wonder. Just because I can imagine I'm just thinking about the Korean analog, and I don't know a lot about I don't actually know. I know zilch about the Korean medical system. I'm a layman. I just get my prescriptions, and I'm good to go, right? But I would say I can imagine how regulated it could and might be. I can imagine it being extremely regulated, and the researchers taking a lot of precedence when it comes to responses to something like COVID. I can imagine it. Don't know if it's true, um, and I can imagine it being very different from America, which is true in other areas of Korea. Um, Maybe it's the case in medicine as well. You could also say he was lucky. Hmm. Rubin defended the bond between doctors and patients, the need for physician autonomy, and the necessity of making judgments in the absence of evidence. At other times, he seemed frustrated that doctors were still relying on treatments for which there was no evidence. I seem to be saying opposite things, and I agree with myself. Okay, that's like a little joke. I can't argue I was super rational either, he finally said. Yeah. There would be a physician that would have said no, 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 and all of a sudden it's his mother. They wanted everything. We had some of our own physicians. We had some of our own physicians admitted, and people were just crazed about what they wanted to do to those individuals. Yeah, life and death, fear, ignorance, raw human behavior in survival mode, classic reaction to threat. Huh. Spiropoulos had. So they're being not friendlier, they're being softer to each other. They're being easier on each other, maybe, and sympathetic to each other. Just want to see roughly where. Oh, I'm at the end. A deeply personal struggle, Spiropoulos. Man. In passing during an interview that both he and his wife had been sick with COVID 19. My wife is very sick and bedridden for 3 days, but she responded well to hydroxychloroquine. His casual certainty was surprising. Huh. But statistically unlikely, given the now significant body of research showing that the drug does not help. Anything else, he repeated, was witchcraft. He still says it again. That's such a good ending for this essay. He says it again. He says it again. He didn't say it because he was tired and stressed out. He says it because he believes it. And the thing that the reason why I'm smiling is just because he is just making this observation, just the same that the doctors on the ground are making. From A to B to C, right? They're sick, they get the treatment, they get better. This is not a randomized controlled trial. Okay? It's just a chronological sequence of events. And you don't want to say that's what caused the healing. You can't say it. You can't say it. And Spiropoulos, he knows that, so he rehearses his argument about relying on research, and in that rehearsed argument is the repeated phrase, anything else is witchcraft. And that just shows how easy it is for even a smart, research oriented person to just make those cognitive like to fall prey to their cognitive biases and just to say the thing that seems intuitively correct, because science a lot of times is not very intuitive. And that contradiction in Spiropoulos is such a good symbol of the contradiction, or of the two sides that were raging during the surge of 2020 spring and summer, I guess spring, mainly spring, right? Man, that's a good ending. That's a good last sentence. That's such a great last sentence. But what did I learn? What I would say right now that all the pre-reading I did actually made my expectations go higher than I think was warranted. Because I didn't get as much. It wasn't as human of a story as I was expecting. I was expecting more focus on on several individuals, but it felt more of it felt more like sweeping, like we were sweeping through different examples really quickly. So I didn't feel as emotionally engaged. Part of it might be because I'm just tired at the moment. Who knows? That is part of the experience of reading, just the time that you're reading and whatnot. But I was expecting maybe more of an individual look. Um, Obviously, there were a lot of characters that came out, a lot of specific people who came out that we were focusing on. Um, I just kind of wish we had a little more. I guess I just was expecting more of an individual focus. I did learn some things though about the sort of how the hospital system works, how the research, like the relationship between researchers and doctors, clinicians, I guess is the word that's most commonly used. So, and I understand now how hospital systems work to 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 get like they enroll people in trials from these hospital systems, which I think that makes sense, right? And I think does that increase my trust in the system? Hmm, maybe. I just wish. What can I say about this, right? There's no real conclusion. I guess that's the thing, right? The point is there's no real answer to equipoise. But there is a sort of answer, which is that you know what? Maybe this essay would have been more hard hitting for me if we kind of develop if this essay had sort of developed the idea of cognitive biases and about the harms of making these gut reaction like gut feel choices on the spot. Um, so actually, this essay was fairly neutral throughout, but I suspect my guess is that this essay actually would have been more interesting to me personally if we had actually come out on the side of the researchers. The extremely painful reality of the ground totally captured, but still come out on the researcher's side. That would have been maybe a more cause interesting argument for me because it was hinted at. It felt, at least if I'm reading this correctly, it felt like the fact that the biases are kind of messing things up was hinted at throughout this essay. I just wish it was more fully developed. That said, I would say just here, I'll just zoom in. That said, I think that was an enlightening read. I just learned more about how the doctor's reality is, like kind of when it comes to like new problems, what the reality is for them. So I have more sympathy for the kind of work they do, and I understand how research intersects with that reality. Basically, the researchers are like, please send us people for these trials, and the doctors are like, please let us do our jobs. And there are very strong feelings on both sides, and COVID was such a horrible, like the surge was such a horrible thing to happen. It just hurt. It just taxed the system. It just burdened the system so much. that it created quite a lot of stress. I really hope these doctors who made personal sacrifices in a lot of cases, who contracted COVID on their own in a lot of cases, who had to make really hard decisions in a lot of cases to expose themselves potentially to COVID to help somebody else live, and who even died in treating these patients. I just really hope these doctors, they're being well taken care of, and I hope they're able to rest and lead more or less humane lives, like sane lives. Now that it's 2022, now that the vaccines are out, now that the ICUs, I hope, are not as strained. Just seeing how intense that was, it's just, yeah, it's giving me a lot of, like, having the insight into now what that situation was like. It's just making me a lot more sympathetic to that struggle. All right. That was the COVID drug wars that pitted Doctor versus Doctor by Susan Dominus. That was my initial reading. And if you guys had a different reaction to that essay, let me know what you thought. Leave them down in the comments below. And if you like this kind of read-throughs, these live reading reactions, subscribe and let me know why you like it. I'm kind of curious what's bringing you here. All right, guys. Happy New Year, and take care of yourselves. Bye.